Well, first of all, I'm so excited to have you back. For anyone who's watching that didn't see your interview, they can listen to that on the podcast. And we're doing something a little bit different today. And we're going to turn the tables and you're going to interview me, which is a change of pace for me because I'm usually the one asking the questions. So we're going to focus this first part of the interview around the first chapter of my book, my Divinity Unbridled. And I'm really excited to dive in and see what comes through.
Well, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. We've been discussing your beautiful book for many months, even before the publication
Yeah.
in March. And as you can see, I have all kinds of markers. It feels like every line, every page is noteworthy.
Thank you.
And I just want to take a minute and show this cover. So beautiful. I really feel that it captures the essence of who you are.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you described Divinity, my Divinity Unbridled, as the love story of your soul. And I would love to have you share how and where it begins.
Yeah, it's funny. I was sort of just turning through the pages of this chapter this morning just to kind of drop into the essence of what it shares. And the first little mini chapter within it is really now. And so I got a taste of what now would be when I first started channeling the book without knowing that that's where I was heading. And that's where I started to channel my first birth in all of existence. And it's not something I had ever experienced before or known about or heard about. And it just one day in meditation that it just started streaming through. And it really took me out into the stars, into the divine. And it took me into creation. It took me into the love of source that we hear about. But I felt it for the first time, what that huge, unconditional, overpowering source of love felt like, to just be held and to be a part of that existence and not be my own being yet. It was just love. And so the birth part of that was feeling what it felt like. It was sort of like, I think I describe it as if I'm like swaying in the ocean, or I'm laying on my back in the ocean and you're just in the undulation of all that is. And then there was turbulence and there was shaking and there was almost like an earthquake of source. And I could feel myself being separated, all of these bits of it being separated into our own, what I call spirits or souls. And the experience of that was so moving. And then as I was being separated, I noticed that something was wrong. And I felt that this is the whole experience as I'm channeling and I'm writing it all as it's happening. And something was wrong, and I was being divided. I was being split in half. And the feeling of being separated, of being torn in two from that place of such wholeness, the remembering of that was so tragic. It felt so heartbreaking and so real. Like I said, I've never experienced anything like it, and it was just real. And so that was my birth into existence. And really that separation of my being into two beings. And that's what I'm calling the twin soul. Is I have me and I have this other half of me, and we're both whole. We're not empty, missing pieces. Yet there is this eternal, divine, unconditional connection that is like looking at yourself in the mirror. It's the perfect piece.
I feel like you're describing something, Hannah, that so many people will be, if not already are, intrigued by. And so, of course, I would love for you to talk more about that. And before you do, you described swimming in that sea of unconditional love. I mean,
Yeah.
that feels like a place where we would all love to find ourselves. And I'm wondering if you can share, if there was something that kind of set you up for that.
Like in the very beginning of Miss Whole Awakening?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Because yes,
Yeah.
I you've also described this as a radical awakening. And so for
Yeah.
those who are listening, I imagine they're really curious, like what led up to that?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a household. My mom is very spiritual. She's very soulful. She's very connected and tapped in. And she's surrounded by people who are similar. And so I grew up aware and surrounded of that, but I never felt like I got it. It never made sense to me. I felt like I was missing something. I felt like maybe that just wasn't for me, sort of agnostic. I wasn't an atheist, but I did not like the word God. I did not associate with it. It didn't move me. In fact, it sort of repelled me. And a little over 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I was doing my mom's, she does a recalibration cleanse, and it's sort of looking at the map of your life in all these different areas for the year and sort of setting up what you really want to cultivate and invite in for the year. And one of the things that just kind of wrote itself down was, I want a connection to the divine. And I was like, that's an interesting request, because like I said, I've never really had that desire. It didn't resonate with me. And 3 weeks later, I got hit in the face with that twin soul recognition in person. And so that for me was the catalyst of awakening. It was a single moment. People talk about sometimes we have these moments in life where our path just completely changes direction. And that was it for me. I was going this direction and it didn't knock me off the path. It literally diverted me a whole different direction. And that was the catalyst for me. And sort of the awakening part of that was seeing myself. That's what that initial recognition was. It was seeing myself raw, without the layers of all of my stories, for the first
So
time.
it was an actual meeting of an embodied
Yeah, human. not made up in my head.
that you recognize as your twin.
Yeah, and immediately recognized. And so that was really the catalyst for me. This is a journey of self, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot about that, because that's what the book is about, is really the love story of me, of my soul, of remembering who I am, of reclaiming who I am, of embodying who I am, and really facing all of the pieces of me that I thought belonged to me that really are not part of the divine me.
So it sounds like the meeting of your twin was a catalyst for this radical awakening and journey to wholeness of self.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was like immediately I started getting up and watching the sunrise, and I started connecting to the moon. And it was like I was getting pieces without maybe being conscious of it, because I wouldn't say I had the words for any of this at that point in time. I just could feel it. But my life just changed, and the way that I saw the world just changed, and it was broader, it was more curious, it was more open, uh, was more devastating. So just so much more of everything heightened.
It sounds like you were beginning to see through the eyes of your soul.
Yes, very, I would say slowly at first, or maybe sort of unconsciously. I didn't, like I said, I didn't have words for it, and I didn't know what the experience was. But now, looking back over the last 3.5 years, that's exactly what it feels like. Just little bits at a time would come through. Just little moments of remembering, and then it would disappear.
Well, I'm wondering how you found reference points to understand what you were experiencing.
Well, a lot of it was internal knowing. I tried to avoid too much research online, because I feel like other people's experiences sometimes, unless it's very pure and clear, they can taint your own experience, or they can influence. And so I don't remember where I found that wording, because it's not something I had ever heard before, even though I knew
The wording
of the twin soul, which I've since come to understand is a thing. And it's actually a word that's tossed around a lot, that I don't personally I don't personally agree with a lot of the ways that it's talked about, now that I've learned that people are experiencing this. But to me, it's just pure divine love, and remembering of what that feels like. So I don't know that I have a specific way I had remembered it. It felt very just organic to my evolution.
Well, I think the term channeling is interesting. I mean, we've heard that term for a while now, and often when we hear about channeling, it's the channeling of some other, being or entity.
Yeah.
And it feels like what you channeled into your book has really been the story of your soul.
Yeah.
Since
From the beginning.
from the beginning, since your original birth.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wonder if you want to say more about birth, original birth, soul birth, rebirth.
Yeah. Well, so I described the original birth, and the birth, and then the separation. And the way I experienced that, as I'm, if we're, in quotes, calling it channeling, was I fully feel like I'm out in that experience. So I'm not just hearing it or picturing it. It's like I almost leave this body and I go there. And so the first experience was what I describe as my pink star spirit in the book. And that's my truest essence, and she's divine, and she's pure, and she's beautiful, and she has a different voice than my soul. And so the way I channel all of me is by including all of her, my soul, my spirit, and then the divine. And so my first life, which I described the first life and my current life in the book. And the first one, I remember the transition of being in the pink star spirit and coming into earth and being a soul. So to me, that's sort of the difference, is they're always connected. but I can distinctly remember the feeling, and it's almost like there's a blend between the two of the spirit and then stepping into an embodied being here on earth. And so my first birth was, I was a sea snail, which I think is so adorable because it's so not what I would pick from. I'd be like, I was a magnificent like lion, or I was a, I don't know, something, a tree, but a snail at
That's
the
very
bottom of
good
the ocean.
how you describe it in the book.
Yeah, and it was just so sweet and pure to remember the way that it's like the first birth, you are totally pure. You have no karmic anything. There's no remembering of anything hurtful or painful or negative, or it's just pure beauty. And so the way I describe it is like I'm a snail and I'm in this shell, and I'm curious, and I kind of poke my head out and I'm just mystified. Just can't believe how beautiful Earth is. And that just felt so sweet to remember the purity of who we all are from that source of love, and how even though something so small, a snail, so tiny little thing can have this experience, really makes you start to understand that every single thing and being on earth is important, and it has something to say and conscious, and is just purely love. So it's an embodiment of love.
That's how I hear this, a pure innocence with a consciousness.
Yeah. And that I would say it was a very short little remembering. It didn't need to be long, but it was profound in that every single thing is just an embodied consciousness of love and part of this huge whole. We get to be both because we're here on earth.
And then you describe your birth into this life.
Yeah. So I go back out into the stars, and and it's almost like I'm out in the stars and I'm looking at the earth. I guess kind of what you would describe like from the International Space Station, but farther out. And I remember seeing this flashing light, this little beacon of light just calling to me. And I just knew it was her. I knew it was my mom. And after reading that, she said the same, she said the same thing. She could hear me. And so that was the remembering of choosing one another, me choosing her and her choosing me, to really come together in this life and step into the purpose of sharing consciousness of love and what that really means and what that looks like in an embodied form, and as a sovereign individual, and then as unified groups of people and collectively what we can really step into and what the potential holds. And so same thing, I remember coming from as a spirit, blending into a soul and coming into her belly and feeling what that feels like in the womb, and in the safety and the protection of the unconditional love of the mother, which is really the unconditional love of that source energy that I was feeling at the beginning.
That's what I was wanting to ask you, how you experience that, as similar or different.
Yeah, I would say it's almost identical, because you can feel yourself, same thing, in the sway of that ocean and in the sway of the womb, and the way that she moves and the way that she laughs and sings and speaks. And my mom is so beautiful that I got to be part of that, part of her, and then step into me.
And then you describe the third birth, which you've touched on earlier in this conversation. And that feels like truly what the story is about.
Yeah, the rebirth.
The rebirth. the rebirth of your soul and the
Yeah.
coming into the wholeness of.
Yeah. And what I describe as the divine me, it's the remembering of all of these things that make me pure, that make me whole, that make me love, and the clearing of all of the things that are not, which is really where the work is, because we can all dream up of living in that love and the light and la la la, it's so beautiful, but really the meat is lives in the soul, and the soul is anchored in between the dark and the light, from my experience.
Yeah. And I wonder if this is a time to talk about some of that, because, when we hear your story, we hear the divine love and the beauty and that experience.
Yeah.
And I know that the process of transformation is a clearing, as you've described. It is the work. And I wonder if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, it's an area I feel like we're missing a lot of in the talk of spirituality and of consciousness, is what it actually feels like to wake up, because it's not easy and it's not comfortable to really, I'll speak for myself only, but from the moment that I had that initial catalyst, the remembering, I would get little bits of information and then it would disappear. And so you think that you have gathered something, or you think you know, and then it's gone and you're left blank again. And that process in and of itself is sort of excruciating. And then really what I feel like is the opening and the pathway to the full embodiment and remembering of the soul is the dark night of the soul, which is where the ego dies. The ego gets laid to rest. It's not ego in a bad way. It's just ego as a personality. The thing that we thought we were, it's not there. It goes away and you're left with nothing, really, is my experience. It was like, well, if I'm not that, I'm just sitting here in the darkness and nothing. And that is devastating.
Mm.
It's
I think you're describing perhaps one of our greatest fears, why we resist
everything.
in that process, the
Yeah.
fear of the nothingness.
Yeah, and at
That we
first,
won't find anything in the void, in the nothingness.
yeah, and then you'll just be nothing forever.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it is really excruciating.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is where the potency and the magic lives, is having the courage to turn toward that part of the self and to go in. And to me, that's the difference from all these things I've been describing out in the stars. To me, that's ascension. That's remembering these external things that have happened. And this part is going in, and it's going down, and it's going into the dark and the shadows, and sort of peeling back the many layers of curtain to see what's really inside. And the nothingness is kind of where that starts. You sit in the nothing until something reveals itself in the shadow.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you might share how you had the courage or the faith to do that descent.
It's a question people ask me a lot, and it kind of makes me laugh because I don't feel like I had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It was never a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I do hear a lot that people say that they are fearful, or that it feels really hard, and it is hard. And for me, there was just no other option. It was, my soul came in with a very strong will to whatever I'm going to do here on earth. I have no clue, but she's she came in with a strong purpose and a will to clear that very quickly. And it was almost like she just charged right through me. And my human brain had no say.
And it is like birth, like labor. You know, once labor begins, there's no turning back.
There was no turning back.
As excruciating as it is, there's only forward.
Yeah. And I feel like if we can have the courage and the fortitude to keep stepping forward, even through the dark, over and over, you know, doesn't matter how long the dark is, just to keep going forward, it will be much more easeful because you're moving in the direction that your soul is leading you. And that was, I followed that. I follow that direction. I follow that push to do that. Otherwise you come up with a lot of resistance and you're just fighting it. And ultimately, I believe that if your soul comes here wanting to learn something, you're going to learn it one way or the other. So if it can be a courageous choice instead of a fight and a battle, I'm going to pick the first option.
How did you care for yourself during that process?
Well, I remember my first real deep, what we're calling dark night of the soul, real ego death. I feel like I had lots of mini ones, but my first one came almost 2 years into the process. So it was a lot of kind of just fumbling around for the first 2 years, which I think is pretty normal, to just have no clue kind of what's going on. And the first one happened right around Christmas. And so I was kind of had a little bit of time. Work is quiet during that time. So I had the space to just be, and to be in the nothingness, and to be in the devastation, and to be in the heartbreak and the total unknown of who I was, and the losing. It's really a loss of who I thought I was. And I thought I was pretty great. So that was a big loss. You know, I feel like my self-confidence, I had, I would say, a healthy amount. I wasn't self-deprecating before. And so to lose all of the things I had worked for in terms of my personality and who I presented myself to the world as, it took space. And this process requires a lot of space, and it requires a lot of alone time and solitude and just being okay with unknown. So my time was spent in a lot of physical nothingness too.
I would love for you to describe how you saw yourself before this awakening, how you operated as that personality and in that identity. What was your life like before?
Oh, my life was so beautiful. I'm an only child, and so I developed a very strong sense of self and self-identity with perfectionism and people pleasing in a way that I thought was great. It was pleasing teachers and pleasing parents and getting great grades and winning all my horse show competitions and doing all the things I was good at. You name it, I could do it. And if I couldn't do it, I didn't do it. It was an absolute dedication to being as perfect as possible, which I used to think was the goal. That to me was like, okay, you've made it. If you can be as perfect as possible and be kind, that's it. And so that's how I saw myself. I saw myself as the one who showed up, as the one who handled things, who took care of things, who was organized and diligent and fierce. And that it's not that that's not true. And that's the funny thing about the ego death, or the death of the personality, is that it's not that those things are not true. It's that they all have to go away so that it can step any of those things that are true for who I am could step through. I don't know if you can see me. I'm like moving from this solar plexus. This is where, to me, that's where the soul steps out from. And so those traits can still be part of who we are, if they are part of who we are, and they come through from an embodied sense versus a feeling of doing it because we need to have approval, or wanting to be liked, or wanting to be part of the crowd and follow what other people are going to approve of. To me, that's the external validation. All of those things that I was for external validation. It was not because that gave me a sense of love from myself.
I think that's a wonderful distinction.
Yeah.
And yes, I believe that's pretty much all of our conditioning.
Yeah. It's fascinating, really, when you think about, I mean, really, it comes down to control is why we've been conditioned that way. External sources wanting to have control over who we are. And I feel like that's been passed down for so long that it has just become completely normal. And the radical idea that it really doesn't matter what anyone thinks about you if you are moving from who you are, which I believe is pure and kind and whole and loving. And who cares? Who cares what anyone else has to say? But that's the key part of that statement for me. Who cares what anyone thinks, because I am moving and living and being and breathing and speaking from the most pure, beautiful part of me.
Thank you. Thank you for really clarifying and affirming that. So this feels like a beautiful time to speak of self-love.
Self-love, yeah. I'm laughing because it's self-love, self-care terms that are tossed around so much, and there are aspects of it that I think is great, that it's becoming more part of awareness of many people. And for me, self-love is not just affirmations in a mirror, and it's not just tending to my whims of what feels good. That's part of it. But to me, self-love is really the fierce devotion of turning toward myself over and over and over again, and being so clear with who I am and who I'm not, that I can love all of who I am. And I can love and give back the pieces that are not mine. To me, that's what self-love is. It's opening myself up to me and holding all of who I am, and then expressing that into the world.
I wonder if you might distinguish for the listeners between soul, ego, soul, and spirit. How you experience those distinctions.
I'm closing my eyes because I'm going to drop into each of them as I talk about them, because they have completely different energetic ways that they reveal themselves to me. So the ego is, I would describe it as, I'm going to describe physical first, is that it feels almost like a heightened adrenaline, kind of grippy feeling, sensation. It's tight, and it's the one who wants to control. It's the one that often is fueled by fear, even if it's not conscious, but it's fueled by, again, the need to be liked, which is a fear of not being liked. It's fueled by competition, which is a fear of losing things. It's fueled by scarcity, all these things that maybe we're not as conscious of. So that's the personality. It's who most of us are conditioned to be throughout maybe middle childhood into adulthood, because I think children don't have that. They're very pure.
And perhaps fueled by the fear or the belief of not being enough.
100%. Not being enough, not being worthy, not being valuable. And so to me, the ego, it's the loudest and it's also the most afraid. It's different than the mind to me. The mind is trainable. The ego kind of, in my experience, kind of has to go away temporarily. The soul is full. The soul I experience really as this container of my human body. She fills me out from the inside out. And she is brave and she is devoted and she is, excuse me, that fierce, unconditional, shows up for me always. That's the way I experience the soul. It's like a lioness. She steps through my body and it's fully embodied experience. The spirit to me is, I'm going to describe it as external just for the purpose of this conversation, even though there's no separation. The spirit for me is the one who is witnessing every single thing in every realm and every dimension and every lifetime, all of the things that are happening. And she's the one communicating and orchestrating to make sure that my soul has the experience that she came to have. And so the communication between them is constant, whether I'm aware of it or not. And so now I can hear right now, I can hear the ego and the mind and the soul and the spirit in all different forms. And it's funny, the ego kind of sits over here in my right hand, which is weird. It's like a hammer. Like she just wants to control things. And it's like, yeah, okay. That's nice. You're gonna just be still and be quiet. And then the soul is here on earth.
Soul is the self we embody.
Yes, the soul is the one we embody, and the spirit is equally divine, but gets more of a bird's eye, high level view.
Sometimes I think of the spirit as a scout.
Yeah.
Having the ability to travel.
Oh, yeah.
Unbound by the body and able to exist in all time, non-linear time.
Non-linear time and
present and future.
And I think really the communication between the soul and the spirit is why, if we can get connected to the soul, and it's why I talk about the soul so much, they're communicating whether we know it or not. And so if we can get connected to the soul will guide us. The soul will give us the courage and the faith to really drop in and be who we are, where we are, without whether you access the voice of the spirit or not.
And I feel that this concept of the twin soul is really intriguing to people. And you shared how you actually met this person and recognized that he was your twin soul. And I know that you are married to a man who you have been with for 11 years. Yeah. And I wonder if you might say something about that distinction for the listeners.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest and most confusing places on the journey for me, because I've been with my husband since I was 18. And when this sort of catalyst happened, we weren't married yet, but I felt such conflicting feelings because I associate being a good girlfriend and a good wife with being faithful, with being only loving to the partner. And in recognizing this twin soul, it basically completely opened me to unconditional love. and limitless love and eternal love. And at first, it felt like I was getting to experience that because of this other person. I was getting to experience, whether I had the words or not, this remembering of divine love because of my connection with this person. And the confusion that comes with that, and the shame, really is what it is. It's shame and it's self-judgment to the nth degree, that, well, if I'm experiencing this type of love, does that make me unfaithful? Does that make me unworthy of having this loyal partner? And that was very challenging to navigate, and to be able to communicate that when I didn't know what was happening. And I feel like that's where I'm able to give people so much grace now, because I'm able to give myself the grace and the forgiveness of just being confused, and then remembering that I am not this divine love and this divine magic because of this other person and my connection with this person. I am divine love and divine magic because I am me. And I feel like that remembering, it changes everything. And it allows me to be in my marriage in a way that is present and honest and not limiting. The love is not limited to one person. And any statement that says it is not love. Love is expansive, and it's totally unconditional, and it's free.
That's what I feel that you share so beautifully in the book. That when you began to experience this unconditional love, it's so expansive, it's so free, it's so unbound, and it really only allows you to be the fullest expression of love that you are.
Yeah, there's no, it's limitless, and then there's also no room for anything else. It doesn't allow, true love does not allow for the other things to come in that don't support it. And so in remembering all of that, it's, wow, I can have this total divine, unlimited, unconditional love and connection with this person and this soul. And I can also have this unconditional, limitless love with someone who I consider a soulmate, someone who I've known in other lifetimes and who I'm committed to in this lifetime. And the two do not, they're just unrelated. They don't take away from one or the other. And I think that, to me, is the remembering of unconditional love, is not just being able to love without conditions, it's limitless love.
It sounds like a coexistence.
Yeah, the love, it's just all there. And then you get to choose how you want to tend to it, what kind of energy you want to put into it to nurture it and foster and support it in this lifetime. But the love itself, the energy of that, it just gets to live and be free.
And that is the love story of your soul. That is Divinity Unbridled.
It really is. It's the remembering that at the very core of who I am is this limitless, unbound, unconditional love. First for myself, and the remembering of what that is for myself, for this twin soul, for my husband, for my friends and family, and then for strangers and for the world.
That's beautiful, Hannah. So where does the twin soul fit into all this now?
Well, my experience of the separation, which is what I described at the very, very beginning of our talk, is that's really the falsehood of this whole journey, is that that's not actually true. And the twin soul, for me, the experience has been to remember that masculine being in myself and to find wholeness in myself and to feel what that initial birth as one really was. To me, that's what what union has been, is stepping into that whole masculine and feminine embodied, and I feel it as a spiral, really stepping in and supporting one another. And we are not in communication, so this, like I said at the beginning, this is an internal journey. This is not about a romantic love story with somebody else. This is love of the eternal me, and remembering really what that is and what that feels like and what it speaks like. And now, I mean, I can hear the different voices. You know, the masculine has a very different voice than the feminine in my being of this twin soul dynamic. And so I can hear both. I get guidance from him and from her. They are just as my soul and my spirit communicate, the two of them communicate. And so I can tune in and really get clear on what is true and what is mine to let go of. And that's, to me, where the magic of this kind of dynamic, if that is what someone's experiencing, is that it's ultimately not meant to just be a physical relationship that you're seeking out. It's continually diverting you back into yourself so that you can remember this non-separation. And then ultimately non-separation with everyone. So it's non-separation with this piece of you that you thought was separated from you, remembering the union of that, which to me then leads you to the union with the collective, with consciousness, with source, with love.
And so it feels like the journey that you're describing is the initial separation from that place of wholeness.
Yeah,
And
it
the
really
journey
is.
back to union within yourself.
Yeah, it's this whole journey is, and I believe all of our journeys of being human, it's the opportunity to remember the wholeness of self. Because even if someone doesn't have this twin soul experience, there's still things that are keeping people separated from being whole, whether it's trauma or illusions or stories or karmic history. I mean, there's so many pieces that keep us in this feeling of being separated and being divided. And that's, to me, that's the opportunity of being human. And it's the reason why we're here. You know, we ask, what's the purpose of life? To me, the purpose of life is to feel this limited capacity of being human, and to then remember the infinite capacity of who we are in our fullest, wholest, most alive, most pure, most beautiful state. And then to live that.
I've known you since before you were born. And I agree, you had a wonderful life up until this point of the radical awakening.
Yeah.
And what I notice I experience you as being more alive from the inside out, and I see you, I experience you having a lot more fun with life.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think that a lot of that comes from when you go through the experience of losing who you thought you were, there's, and then remembering who you are, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
When you remember who your eternal, most vibrant self is, and you live from that, what else is there aside from helping other people remember that in themselves? And
And
there's
maybe,
nothing to be afraid of.
and maybe one of the key words is freedom.
Oh, my favorite
That's
word these days.
that's what I really think of. This really ecstatic freedom.
Yeah, it is. It's ecstasy. It's
Mm-hmm.
freedom beyond physical divide. Anything that just limits us here on earth is this much of a fraction of what freedom is to me. Freedom is the clearing of karma. That's a big one because we could say we want to be free here on earth, and there's stuff that has to be faced. And so it's the clearing of karma. It's the clearing of trauma from this life or pain from this life. And it's the courage to step into all of who we are in our full expression and to live that every moment of every day as truth. You know, truth and freedom and love to me are all intertwined. If we're devoted to love, we are devoted to being true to ourselves, and we're devoted to being true to what the truth of others is and not controlling that. And that leads us to freedom.
It's beautiful, Hannah. I want to ask you two more questions, if I may, before we finish this
Sure.
time together. Wondering what you would offer to someone who is interested in this experience, how you might encourage them to invite the experience, if that's something that someone wanted.
I'm going to clarify. Do you mean the awakening experience or the twin soul experience?
The awakening
Okay.
experience. Mm-hmm.
The awakening experience, first, I think there's something in you that has to want it. I mean, some people are just going to be kind of hit like a bus and into awakening, but if we can choose it, it can be more fun, even in the times that are not so fun. So first, I would say there's got to be a desire to turn inward and to uncover and to have curiosity about what might be true and what might be false in the way that we're living. And I think it really starts with giving time and space to be alone, to be still, and to really hear or begin to hear what's going on internally beyond the mind. And so some people experience that as meditation. I think that's part of it, but to me it's really choosing to turn inward and to kind of dive into the self. And I think a lot of people, you need some kind of guidance for that, because that is a scary thing if you've never done it before.
Yeah, lifelines.
Yeah, it's, and I was talking with my mom about this the other day. It's like having someone who's a flashing light, a beacon for you. Whether they're actively guiding you or not is not really the point. It's just something, an anchor almost, to remind you that even when you're in the darkest dark shadow, painful, excruciating times, you're still safe, you're still whole, you're still lovable, You're still all of these things and valuable. You're just going through kind of the muck.
Mm-hmm. Transformation.
Yeah, it's not comfortable. And so to have that reference point of, oh yeah, okay, I can, it's safe for me to keep going. It's safe for me to be courageous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's safe for me to devote myself to me.
I know there's so much more about the book that we would love to talk about, and we will. And I'm wondering if you want to close today by talking about where your vision, what your vision is for going forward.
Well, I have a few visions forward. I guess I'll speak first towards my vision of what I see as possible for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And my vision really is for people to face themselves. And I feel like if we can all take responsibility for ourselves and our own journey and our own wounds and our own karma and our own lessons, then we can step back into the world healed, and we can step back into the world with purpose, and we can step back into the world as a beacon for other people who are making the courageous choice to step into something that's more conscious. And that's easier said than done because of all the things that are happening in the world. But that's, to me, that's the most important piece, because when we are in that state of total, absolute devotion and love of self, we're able to accept the things that are happening and show up in service of making it better, making it more kind and more equal and more loving.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the key word, service.
Yeah, and we can't be of service. It's like put the mask on yourself before you put it on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the perfect analogy of showing up for life. Is you can have this great desire to make an impact and to help someone else, and it doesn't mean you have to stop that, completely. But until you do that for yourself, and until you embody that total love of self and that total acceptance and celebration, really, of who you are, it's amazing. It's such a gift, and it's then you can offer that to someone else, and you can be of service to your community, your friends, your family, the world, and continue the things that you really wanted to change and make an impact through.
And I know that that's what you're beginning to do personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Offer yourself in service. Do you want to say anything about that before we say goodbye today?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. I have no attachment anymore to how life is going to shake out, which is such a shift for me from where I was 3 years ago, feeling so fixed on what my life path was. And so I'm really just following what is coming through my soul every day. And I have kind of two facets of what that is right now. One is Divinity Unbridled, which is this podcast, and it's podcast, it's book, and I'm now doing one-on-one sessions called Sacred Witness. And so that's a 3 or 6 month path of turning toward the self that is guided, that is held, that's supported. And it's really a place where people get to be mirrored in the most beautiful parts of them, so that there is sense of safety and remembering of courage in turning into the darkness. And that, I feel like, is one of my gifts, is I can see the most bright, pure essence of people, whether that's how they're showing up in the world or not. And so to have that reflected back is extremely powerful. And then to also be guided into the dark and to be supported down kind of in the pit of the soul, and to know that you're not alone. So that's something I've started offering, and it's beautiful. I feel like it's such a gift to watch people unfold and to hold that space for someone. I think if we could all do that for even just one person, the world would be a completely different place, to really hold with such tenderness and compassion and non-judgment and no expectation of any results, just showing up for what's present and what's true. I feel like is kind of my role.
It's beautiful, Hannah. It's a beautiful gift and a beautiful offering.
Thank
And I
you.
do feel that that's what we all came here for, to
I
reflect
agree.
our divinity.
Yeah, I don't think any one of us is more special than the other. We're experiencing different things perhaps, or remembering in different ways, but at the core, I mean, I can see it. At the core, we really are all completely equal, completely whole, and completely capable of showing up for one another in a way that is so far beyond the way that we're showing up right now in this lifetime, in this place on earth.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you reflecting back some of these questions to me, and our plan is to do a couple more of these because the book is divided into 4 parts, and so there's so much content, and so I think we'll have a couple more of these conversations just talking about some of the other themes. And what I do want to say that if anyone wants to get the book, you can get it on Amazon, and you can also get the click-through link on divinityunbridled.com. And I would say I also have this other, I don't know if you know about this, but I created this journal that goes with the book, and it's digital only and it's completely free, but it's 60 pages of incredibly beautiful and potent questions that if someone's looking to sort of start getting curious of going inward, this would be a great place to start. And like I said, it's totally free. So this is on divinityunbridled.com.
It's like a really valuable resource.
Yeah, it's I love it. I mean, it feels like a gift.
I'd like to say one more thing about the book.
Okay.
When you asked me to endorse it, I wrote on the back, reading Divinity, my Divinity Unbridled, is like drinking star. And that's the experience I had with it. And that's what I look forward to talking about as we go forward.
Me too. Thank you.
That experience of being with the essence of the stars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's an honor, and I'm so grateful for you, and I love you so dearly.
I love you, my goddess daughter.